So welcome all. In this session, we are going to talk about various career options in finance after MBA, what the industry expects from us when we kind of go and apply for those roles. Uh, we will try and cover a set of sectors in this session. They may not have all the sectors that are there, for which we'll probably do another session, because obviously finance is a large field. But the segments that we are going to cover today are investment banking, markets, equity research, credit research, and private equity / venture capital. So these are the key areas that we're going to basically look at today and cover across the spectrum of these areas. What are the key roles that are involved in these segments? What are the day-to-day kind of things that anyone in this sector would do? Some of the major firms and their names in these areas. What are the key skill sets needed, or what do firms really look at when they're recruiting people in some of these areas? And are there any common skill sets that are relevant? We'll also try and look at, what is the kind of relevant picture about all of these sectors in India with respect to the jobs market, and try and decode a few of questions that we've already received around what these segments are, right? So let's begin with the first one, which is investment banking, right? So what is investment banking? If you look at investment banking broadly, an investment bank, very loosely put, is an advisor or sort of a consultant to a corporate, right? To a corporate. And you are broadly, advising the corporate to either raise capital or deploy capital. There are two broad functionalities that you're going to work with. You're either going to raise capital. So when you raise capital, there could be multiple ways you can raise money. And when you deploy capital, there could be multiple ways you can deploy that money. But in a nutshell, almost everything under investment banking would fall under these two broad brackets, right? So let's understand broadly what are the classifications of investment banking. And I'll use multiple classifications of investment banking to help us understand what kind of roles exist and what are the key skill sets that are needed. So you could, in a way, divide investment banking into transactions and markets. So transactions will be all your capital raise and capital deployment in terms of, if you're doing an IPO, if you're raising debt capital, if you're selling a stake to someone else, a private placement, etc., where a company is trying to raise money by selling its shares or through debt. One of these two things is happening, right? Or transactions could involve where a company is trying to buy another company by deploying money it has, correct? So you could either raise money or deploy money. So M&A, etc., all of it would come here. The second portion of this would be markets. Markets would be basically areas where you would basically be dealing in various asset classes. You would be trading, you would be creating positions, you would be running risk management around it. A lot of the times this is on behalf of clients. So basically deploying money that a corporate client has given to you to invest in certain asset classes. There used to be huge proprietary trading desks that used to run with investment banks some time back, but then they have been kind of reduced in size post the 2008 financial crisis. But a financial institution or an investment bank could use their own money as well to trade in markets. Some guys in India, for example, would do that. So the markets functionality could include those two as well. So in a nutshell, the transactions piece is basically M&A or raising money like an IPO, etc., right? An investment bank typically guides a company to that. Markets is typically trading, structuring, all of those kind of areas. So structuring is basically, let's say there is a big corporate client who comes to you and says, okay, I want to buy dollars, or I want to create a hedge for dollar and yen. So what do I do? Right? So in that case, you would have a structuring desk, which would basically come up with a solution there, some sort of a derivative solution that would come out there. So that's the markets function that kind of comes out of investment banking, right? An investment bank is basically, a consultant to a corporate in raising or deploying bank. A full service investment bank basically does everything, does transactions, does markets, right? You could look at some of the major firms in the investment banking space. So investment banks are classified as something called as bulge bracket IBs, the larger ones, the global ones. So the likes of Goldman, Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan, Deutsche, etc. would come here. You could look at the mid-market or mid-sized IBs, which would include a lot of the Indian companies like Kotak, ICICI Securities, Edelweiss, LinkedIn International, Jefferies, etc. You could look at some smaller niche boutique investment banks, which could include firms like Avendus, O3 Capital, Spark Capital, Allegro Capital, all homegrown Indian firms that you would have heard names of, right? So basically, in a nutshell, these are the major sort of firms. There are obviously many other firms as well, but these are some of the popular names that you would look at. They're also sort of classified in terms of, are they full service banks where they do all kinds of things? So for example, a full service bank would offer market services, would be doing transactions, would be doing advisory, IPOs, equity, debt, everything. Boutique IB could be focusing on any one specific area, which could be, let's say, only transactions, and within transactions also only equities. Each of these also would be strong across a segment as well, right? So the verticals that could be created could also be sort of with respect to either, the instrument that you're using to raise money or deploy money, or it could be with respect to sector. So I'll come to that in a minute. Then investment banks are kind of classified in terms of, what we commonly hear about, what is front office, middle office, and back office kind of roles. So typically your front office roles include the core IB functions, all your M&A, transaction advisory, etc. that comes here. Your research comes here, right? So if you're doing kind of equity research, for example, for an investment bank, or doing a sector research, that comes here broadly. Common parlance, obviously they could be different in different firms. Middle office typically is the ones which deal with the front office guys. So your risk management is here typically, right? Compliance sits here. Back office, on the other hand, is all your operations basically, right? So operations, technology, all of that is back office basically. So those are your broader kind of classifications that you're looking at. From an MBA perspective, we typically are looking at these two segments broadly for the roles that would come to campuses. If you're an MBA in finance, then you would most likely kind of be looking at these two segments, front office or middle office, for specific kind of roles that would come, right? You could also classify the market segment within investment banking into equity capital markets and debt capital markets. So if you're doing things like an IPO or a private placement, right? Something like what, let's say, a Reliance did for Geo Platforms, those were equity capital market transactions. They were private placements, right? Secondary offering, floating a company, those kind of things. Basically, equity capital is being raised. Capital markets could be, your primary markets, which are sort of IPOs, secondary markets, which are kind of markets on which shares could be sold, or private segments. Debt capital markets basically help companies and governments with raising debt through issuance of bonds, debentures, those kind of securities. So if tomorrow Reliance has to raise 10,000 crore as debt, they will go to an investment bank who's strong in the debt capital market segment. If they have to raise 10,000 crore of equity, sell stake in one of their companies, they will go to companies which are strong in equity capital markets. And those distinctions could be different in different firms when you're looking at, right? You also see that firms in these segments are segregated. So we saw all these firms could also be segregated on the basis of sector. So some of them are what are called as sector agnostic, right? So you don't necessarily, you deal with all the sectors that come to you. Some of those could be strong in certain sectors, like tech is a big sector, and some firms like specialize in all kind of tech deals that happen, right? Or education is a sector, and some firms specialize in education kind of a segment. Consumer is a sector, and someone could specialize in consumer as a sector. So larger firms typically are sort of sector agnostic. Someone like an Avendus, for example, is strong or considered strong in the tech segment in India, right? And because most of the new age deals happen with something or the other to do with technology or digital, they have been one of the four banks at the forefront in this entire space. Not to kind of miss out the others as well. Others have also kind of done well over the last few years, right? Now, what are the skills that someone would need in these areas? If you were, let's say, in an investment banking outfit, either in markets or transactions, how do you go about kind of building a career? What are the key skills needed? Now, think about it. I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say there is a European firm that wants to buy out a tech firm in India. So you need to have a complete understanding of the tech landscape, industry analysis. You need to know which firms are kind of existing in those landscapes, which firms are the best fits for a particular company, right? I'll give you another example. Let's say there is a large hospital that wants to acquire another hospital, right? They're trying to acquire a hospital. Now, in the healthcare segment, it's if you think about it, it's very similar to your hotels industry. It's a very high fixed cost business. Most of your capital is kind of put initially. Operating cost is not as large as the fixed cost component that exists, right? So obviously scale matters. The larger your scale, the larger your costs kind of spread over. And so if you look at broadly hospitals in India, you would see that hospitals that have greater than 1,000 beds are valued more, more than those that have less than 1,000 beds, right? That's, it could be 1,000, it could be 1,200. I'm just using, let's say, a hypothetical number for the time being, right? Now, if you are advising this hospital buy another hospital, and let's say this hospital has 800 beds, the first thing you would go and find out is, how can you take 800 above 1,000? Because if 800 goes above 1,000, the valuation per bed basically goes up from where it is right now, right? So you could create value in that process just because the market values hospitals with more than 1,000 beds more. So the first skill set needed is to be able to derive this relationship, find out that such a relationship exists, which means you have to have a proper pulse and understanding on the industry, right? Now, you need to identify the firm that is likely to acquire, right? The firm that is likely to acquire, who's the acquirer here, and the firm that is likely to get acquired, right? So this needs to be a firm that is probably not doing too well, right? So their costs are high, they don't have money, they're not able to run it properly. So you need to be able to find out using financial statement analysis of the company, analyze the company and figure out who's the likely candidate to go for a sale. You need to be able to do financial statement analysis and find out who's the likely candidate who's going to go for a buy, right? It's not like the business will fall on our lap. We have to go and pitch this to various hospitals as an investment bank and go and tell them, look, your valuation can increase if you increase your size from 800 to 1,000. So why don't you go and acquire someone, right? So obviously we need knowledge about the industry. We need a complete understanding of what companies are likely to be buyers, what companies are likely to be sellers. And then of course there is a price that you have to kind of define. That's where the valuation understanding comes in. So if you are in the transaction space, these are critical skills that are needed. You need to be understanding the industry, you need to be understanding the company, you need to be understanding the valuation metrics that play out in the sector, right? If you're in the market segment, you need to have a complete understanding of global markets, various instruments, asset classes, equity, debt, derivatives, currencies, etc., right? You need to, in any of these segments, broadly have a good business development and negotiation skills, because especially in the front office, you'll be dealing with clients, you'll be talking to them, you'll be going to a hospital management and telling them, let's acquire something. You need to be good negotiating in that context, correct? So that's your key skill set that is needed with respect to your investment banking segment. Obviously, more skills are needed. And it's not like these are the only list of skill sets that would be required, but this would broadly suffice, in terms of the major key skill sets that you would require. In terms of the number of jobs that are available, this is a segment which has a lesser number of jobs available. However, that's not something that is to discourage anyone who's applying for these segments. It's just to give a clear picture that the skills that are needed are non-negotiable. The firms expect a lot from students because a lot of the students would be vying for these roles, and so consequently it is imperative that you have hands-on understanding of a lot of these areas before you are going into an interview of an investment banking firm. That's absolutely imperative, right? So that's something that comes and talks about investment banking. That in a nutshell is broadly investment banking. That is this, right? So that's basically the crux of investment banking as a segment, as a career option, and what kind of skills would be needed in investment banking as a role. Let's move ahead to the second topic, which is equity research. Now, usually equity research could be a component of investment banking because a lot of there's very thin line, right? Goldman would do equity research as well. Equity research is basically research on, in very simple parlance, research on stocks. You're analyzing publicly listed companies that are trading on stock exchanges. So when you see a research report on Reliance Industries or you see a research report on Amazon, these are all done by equity research guys, right? Now, equity research gets divided into two broad segments. There's something called as the buy side and there's something called as the sell side. What is the buy side? Typically, anyone who's buying anything, or buying is actually a misnomer here, transacting on anything. Anyone who's basically taking an action is in the buy side. So a fund manager is on the buy side, right? Sell side is pure research, right? So a broker or a broking house is on the sell side. The broker tries to sell the brokerage to the buy side guy. So if I am a fund manager, let's say I'm a big mutual fund house in India, and I'm going to buy, let's say, uh, 1 lakh shares of Reliance today. How will I go and execute this transaction? I'll need a broker. How do I choose the broker? Now, there are various aspects on how do I choose the broker. One of those aspects is what quality research do I get from a certain broker. So broking houses or brokerages would come out with equity research reports that are given to fund managers in the expectation that at some point of time, the fund manager is going to transact using their broking platform. That's the broad modus operandi in terms of how equity research works, right? So buy side is the people who are who are managing money or who are investing, selling, buying, doing all kinds of transactions. So all your fund managers are basically buy side guys. Sell side guys are the guys who are providing research, both institutional as well as retail, right? So your sell side guys could be equity research guys who are doing research where their clients are institutional clients like hedge funds, mutual funds, financial institutions, etc. Or you could be doing research for high net worth individuals where your clients could be individuals who are trading on stocks, correct, or investing in stocks. So that's the nature of the game. Simple industry. There isn't like too much to kind of comprehend or understand per se. You're looking at listed equities. Usually the listed equity universe is huge. Not all firms look at the entire universe. So out of the universe, you create a subset called what is your coverage universe. Most companies, even the larger ones, would have a coverage. So if you look at India, for example, the listed universe would have about, let's say, 4,000 stocks across BSE and NSE, right? The coverage universe of any reasonable sized broking house, sell side broker, would be 200 stocks. They would be tracking at any given point of time 200 broad stocks and giving recommendation. At best 400 to 500, nothing more than that, right? The buy side, on the other hand, is a set of fund house. So they obviously need to have a bigger coverage, and across multiple sell side firms, they are able to kind of create a slightly larger coverage. But in general, the sell side is the segment that does the more detailed research work. Now, again, this is not a gross generalization. It's just the way things are. So a sell side guy typically is going to be a sector expert over a period of time. If you join the sell side equity research firm, then over a period of time, you kind of become a sector expert. Then you become a head of research, or a group of similar sectors, like let's say consumers would come together. All kinds of consumer segments could be bunched together. All kind of cyclicals like agri commodities and commodities could be bunched together. So initially you become a sector expert, but 10 years down the line, a sell side research guy would probably be researching not more than 25 stocks. So these guys become like sector experts, go in depth in each sector and company. The buy side, because the coverage universe is large, is a slightly more broader segment, right? So you may not be going in depth in terms of building a model right to the last assumption that is there, because you get all that data from sell side guys. You will get models, you will get research, right? So essentially all of that is available. You use that to kind of go and build an opinion. So you need to have a broader perspective. There's another behavioral difference as well. The sell side guys are typically guys who are doing broadly, so let's look at the companies first, and then I'll come to kind of the behavioral difference again. So again, there's sort of an overlap because your large sort of firms will be doing both activities. So a Kotak Securities, for example, will also have a sell side broking arm and will also have a mutual fund arm. ICICI Securities is the sell side arm. ICICI Prudential is the buy side arm. Other mutual funds would be your buy side guys. PMSs alternative investment funds, hedge funds, financial institutions, FIIs, all of them are buy side guys. Sell side would include guys like Kotak Securities, Motilal Oswal, JP Morgan, Nomura, a host of others. India has about 45 mutual funds, right? Approximately, if I'm not wrong, about 200 to 300 alternative investment funds, maybe more at this point of time. Sell-side broking houses, larger ones are about 15 to 20, and then you have a bunch of others. So in total, about another 30 to 50 mid-sized ones. So these are the large ones like the Kotaks and Motilal Oswal's, JP Morgan's, Nomura's of the world. And then you have smaller ones as well, or mid-sized ones as well, who would come here. So approximately that's the spectrum of the firms that are there. The behavioral difference in the two sides, sell side and buy side, is here you are basically researching on something, right? So if I say Reliance Industries is good, you should buy it. Best case Reliance goes up, worst case Reliance goes down. Nothing really happens other than that, right? People might come and tell that your research is not good, but that's broadly about it. Nothing else happens there. Buy side, on the other hand, is actually action. You have done the action. So you will go and buy Reliance Industries. Now, if it goes wrong, you actually have skin in the game, right? What's called as skin in the game. Obviously, skin in the game also means you'll have your own money in the game. But broadly, if you think of the life of fund manager, it's more nerve-wracking than anything else, because you're tracking markets and someone else's money is at stake and you're actually acting on it. It's not just research which you can eventually kind of get off. So typically buy side guys need to be good behaviorally to be able to kind of handle big market movements. That is absolutely necessary. If as a skill set that doesn't exist in a lot of people, you're not calm under those pressure situations, then that needs to be developed before you kind of try and build a segment around that, build a career around that, right? Let's look at what kind of skill sets are needed. Now, again, very similar skill sets, but now you have listed companies that are available. So a lot of data is available. You need to have macro perspectives. What's happening with the economy and what is likely to happen because of that change in the economic scenario. You will look at, again, an industry analysis and company analysis in detail. So financial statement analysis and industry analysis are kind of cornerstones. You can't run away from that. You'll obviously do valuation because you need to find out what is the correct price of the company that you're investing in. You need to look at equity markets and understand how markets work. What kind of factors impact markets, what kind of issues could be market specific issues that could create movement in prices, etc. Plus, understanding of tools like Excel, etc. are very useful. If you know Excel, then obviously that's a very good skill set to have, because eventually your valuation models, etc. will be built on Excel essentially, correct? So that in a nutshell is your equity valuation segment. Once again, we already know less number of firms, very few roles available across campuses for freshers. Not to discourage us again, it is just to again say that skills are sort of non-negotiable, right? And that is also not to say that roles are not available. Roles are available, but roles are less frequently available. So if your college gets like 10 roles or 5 roles in these areas, you have to be absolutely well prepared for those roles. Once you get an interview, you need to be completely prepared to nail it there and then, right? Because the next opportunity could take time to come. Even if you're a working professional and you're already in the industry, that could take some time to come. So it's important to understand that you prepare very, very well with respect to these roles, because of the demand supply gap that comes. That's the reality we are in. There are enough roles available basically across these segments. It's just that you would want to kind of get them at the first point that these are available. So skills basically become non-negotiable in that context. Fair enough? That's equity valuation for us. The next role we are looking at is credit research. Now, whatever equity research does for equities, credit research does for credit, which is debt, essentially, right? This is in India, at least an upcoming area, because debt markets have not been very vibrant in India. They've started becoming vibrant of late, and you've seen some sort of hiccups there, where companies have defaulted on bonds. Bonds have not been analyzed properly. Rating agencies have probably been under the fire around that. Credit research broadly gets done in two kinds of agencies. One, you have these independent rating firms, the likes of CRISIL, India Ratings, ICRA, CARE, etc. and you have banks who would independently do some sort of credit rating before extending a loan to a corporate, right? So every bank will also do some sort of a credit research segment. As debt markets evolve in India, more and more research is relevant on these areas, especially with the kind of hiccups we are getting in India, where very recently, for example, some mutual fund had stopped sort of redemptions from their schemes purely because they had suffered some sort of a value loss in the bonds that they have invested in. So obviously there is a lot of hue and cry in terms of how the research around this is done, and rating agencies, while they have been under fire, uh, are the ones which basically do this job. It's a difficult job because in debt, unlike some of the other areas of work, it's not just the ability of a firm that you're looking at in terms of repayment. You also need to understand the willingness of the firm to make a repayment, right? So a lot of the times the research required goes significantly beyond your conventional financial statement analysis, right? The rating agencies, the major ones in India are CRISIL, India Ratings, ICRA, CARE. Most of these are kind of owned by global agencies. So CRISIL is kind of owned by S&P. India Ratings is owned by Fitch. So you have basically global guys who are associated here. The role is similar to all the other major firms globally. You basically analyze the bond markets and companies issuing bonds. Let's think about it. If today a company is going to issue, let's say, an infrastructure company that is building a toll road or a highway is coming for raising money, you need to understand the macro perspective, which is what is the likely scenario of toll revenue that this company is going to earn. The company is going to give you estimates, but you still need to be able to independently verify it. You need to be able to understand the industry, the company. A deeper understanding of financial statements is necessary because a lot of the times the companies may not report what is there to be exactly reported. So you need to dig deeper to understand that. And so consequently, that's an important area. As I said, just not the ability of the company to repay, but also you have to look at numbers and figure out quality of financial statements and see whether there could be a problem in terms of willingness to repay as well. And you never get kind of 100% answer there, but you get some sort of tidbits that say that, you could, if a company has shortchanged a set of stakeholders at some point of time in the past, you could have a scenario where they could shortchange the debt holders as well at some point. You need to understand the valuation of debt securities. You need to understand all kinds of debt markets and instruments that are available. What kind of bonds are issued? Are these convertible bonds? Are these standard bonds? Are these bonds which have some sort of a derivative enabled in them, which are called as callable bonds or puttable bonds, for example? There are a host of these instruments which are available. You'll learn all of this across the construct of your finance courses as well, and so you will learn about this. Even if this looks daunting at this point of time, don't worry about it, but you need to understand the debt market well in order to be able to work in credit research segment. You need to understand financial statement analysis well in order to be able to work in here. Now this is an upcoming area, right? And there are relevant and enough roles available. So you do get reasonable number of roles in these firms, CRISIL, ICRA, etc., and India Ratings, etc., across these segments that are coming in. So that's broadly credit research. What are the key skills needed? Similar skills to equity research, but just that at least your equity research requires a good understanding of financial statements, but credit research goes one step deeper into that, right? So that becomes an important segment to kind of consider and look at, right? Let's look at the next segment, which is private equity and venture capital. Now, this is a very highly sought after segment. In terms of stages of investing in a company, life cycle of a company, there is early stage investing, and then there is late stage investing, right? Late stage investing is typically when you are in public markets, right? So your listed companies are all going to kind of come here. Early stage investing is where the company is at a nascent stage. So typically a startup that has then grown to bigger stages. So in this life cycle, you initially have angel investors, then you have VC funds, venture capital funds, and then you have private equity funds. Private equity is typically the larger guys. So when you look at the deals that have happened in geo platforms, that's something that a lot of the private equity guys are doing, right? Now, again, there's sort of an overlap between VC and PE as a segment, but broadly, you would have, in terms of deal size, larger deal size, to the tune of 500 crore, 1000 crore, anywhere between 100, $200 million going all the way up to $1 billion, $2 billion is all under the purview of private equity typically. VC funds typically are looking at smaller deal sizes. So anything ranging between $10 million to $100 million typically is where venture capital funds kind of come in. Again, there is no hard and fast rule. They could overlap. A VC fund could go and do a bigger investment, and a PE fund could go and do a smaller investment as well. So those things can happen, but usually that's the general nomenclature that is there, right? This is a tricky segment to get into because there are a handful of PE VC firms available in India. By broad estimates, there are about 1,500 odd professionals working in this segment pan India at this point of time, right? So if you look at the total industry size, that itself is between 1,000 to 2,000 people. Not many people leave this industry, so attrition is low, and so consequently, number of new jobs that get created are a small function. This doesn't even most of the times go to the campuses to begin with. So this is usually a step 2 kind of a role. Getting into these directly is difficult. That's the real picture. Obviously, if something comes to your campus and you kind of are able to kind of crack that as an interview, then nothing like it. But the number of roles are limited. A handful of firms will come to campuses for these kind of roles. Not too many will come, right? So difficult segments to get into directly as a fresher after doing an MBA. Usual movements happen from investment banking. So that's why I said it's step 2 of your career. You get into an investment banking role and then move to a private equity role, or you get into a consulting role and then get into a private equity kind of a role. That's the usual movement that a lot of the people kind of do across their careers. Again, that's not to say that roles are not available at all, but this is even fewer than what is available in investment banking and equity research. Investment banking and equity research, a reasonable number of roles are available every year. So you could vouch and try for those roles and get into those roles. But these are certain segments where you would typically have lesser number of roles available. So obviously the skill sets that are needed become sort of interesting. Some of the major firms that you would have heard, and most of these in India typically are your, the ones which you would classify as VC firms. So Accel Partners, Sequoia, A91 Partners, True North, Matrix Partners, India Quotient, Bloom Ventures. There are a host of others which are there, right? You do a Google search, you'll find most of these names as well. So essentially, these are the firms that would be in the PE VC space in India. Try and understand what they do when you look at that. So this role is slightly different from your understanding of markets as such, right? When you understand markets for equity research or credit research, you need to look at what's happening in current markets. Here, a lot of the times you're looking at emerging trends, right? You have to look at industries which are nascent industries, companies which are nascent companies, new companies, what is happening in those companies, what is happening in those industries. You need to be ahead of the curve to be able to figure out what will work, what will not work, right? Valuation concepts specific to the industry, and obviously because this is early stage, your conventional valuation concepts don't work that easily, right? So you have to kind of come up with sort of substitutes that could be used for valuation concepts. Most of the times you go by the hunch that a company is going to build something great that is going to kind of become a big market product, and that's basically what is the analysis that someone should be able to do. Obviously Excel is something that is relevant and used across some of these segments, so that's something you would want to kind of look at in this as well. As I said, lesser number of roles available, but whatever roles are available, be very, very well aware of the startup ecosystem across the world. Be aware of what are the key emerging trends. How would you go and value those firms? Why do companies kind of work? There's one interesting skill set that is needed in this industry that is slightly different from a listed entity or a large entity. If you are someone who's analyzing a listed company, you probably have to have the hat of a cynic. You need to be able to, you need to be critical of whatever data is going to be given to you. In simple words, you have to disbelieve all the information that is given to you and start from there. Don't believe what is given to you in the annual report. Start from there, try and build your thesis from there, right? The key skill, as I would quote, is a hat of mistrust that needs to be there if you're analyzing a listed company. On the other hand, if you're analyzing a smaller company or a startup, that hat needs to change to a hat of trust. Because at this point, if you're looking at a small firm or a mid-sized firm, you really don't have too much data to go by, right? It's difficult because most people kind of have those same hats. So you look at Reliance Industries with the same skepticism as you're looking at one of these new age firms that is coming up. And you would say, okay, why does this new firm get so much valuation? It doesn't make sense, right? You need to remember that you have to trust the founders of a new firm. Otherwise, you'll just not get ahead. You'll never be able to invest in a company, because at the onset of the if you look at Amazon and you look at the valuation curve of Amazon, you would just look at Amazon starting right from 1997 with disbelief, 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 and then one fine day, you realize that they've taken over the world, right? So it's important that some of these skills are understood when you're looking at companies. When you're analyzing listed entities, publicly available data, then you have to look at it with skepticism. But when you're analyzing companies that are startups, you have to take a leap of faith a lot of the times, right? Because that's all that you have in this segment. So that is a subtle difference, but it's not an easy jump to make if you're on one side of the spectrum to the other side of the spectrum. Keep that in mind when you're looking at PE and VC as an industry, right? So that's PE and VC for us. What are the common skills that are needed across these segments, right? If you look at these segments, so obviously solid financial analysis skills are needed. There's no getting away from that. You have to be absolutely good with financial analysis skills. Strong conceptual understanding of valuation concepts. So two things that are absolutely critical. If you say that you want to build a career in finance, you should have read annual reports of companies, right? You can't say I like analyzing companies, but then you don't show interest in reading annual reports of companies. You have to develop that interest. And as you start reading those, you have to kind of dig deeper and find data and find meaning in that data, right? Analysis is again a sort of a misused or abused word. It's not expected from someone who's doing MBA in finance that you obviously need to know ratios, for example, financial ratios and all. But more than that, you need to be able to analyze those. Calculation is not something that is really relevant in today's day and age. Remembering something is not something that is a skill that is worth sort of paying for, because Google is available. But analyzing those skills is analysis is a skill. Curiosity is a skill that is absolutely critical to this area. So solid financial analysis skills, strong conceptual understanding of valuation concepts, industries. You need to be able to read in annual reports. You need to be good with industries. At least read about an industry, know about an industry, know about the companies in that industry. Understand markets, various asset classes. How do equities work? How do you invest in equities? Why do stock prices go up? Why do stock prices go down? How do bonds work? Why do companies default on bonds? How do derivatives work? Understand all of that, right? And standard tools like Excel, PPT, etc. are always relevant. So that's something that is relevant across the spectrum of these areas that we look at, right? So that's broadly it in terms of our discussion on these common areas of finance and what kind of roles are available in these areas. That's it in terms of what I had to discuss in this particular session.